Hello, everyone. Yeah. Thank you for joining us today. I would like to thank the organizers. This has been a very interesting morning so far. I know I'm the only presentation standing between you and lunch, so just bear with me for the next 15 to 20 minutes. Hopefully, I can give you an insight into some of the security consideration that we see as a risk with post-quantum cryptography and with quantum computing. A lot of the things that will be discussed today in my short speech, as well as many of the things that we've discussed today already, are like qubits. They can be 0 and 1. A lot of the things that we hear can be right, can't be wrong at the same time, because we still don't know exactly what we are going to face in the next 10 to 15 years with quantum computing. We're trying to guess, we're trying to prepare, but what we know for sure is that from a security perspective, the cyber threats that are gonna emerge with quantum computing will probably make everything we know today obsolete to a big part, and will also mean that everything that we have invested in when it comes to cybersecurity will need to be revisited. There's a lot of thought leadership being driven by Palo Alto in this field, and I'm proud to be working for a company that is on the leading edge of protecting the future when it comes to quantum computing, and I hope I will be able to share a little bit of that with you today. We've all seen, throughout yesterday and today, quantum computing. We have seen what developments are happening. And while we can predict how many qubits we will have in a chip in the next year or in the next 3 years, what concerns us most from a security perspective is what we don't know. What concerns us most is that there might be some state players that are developing technologies that we don't know of. And while there are few companies that are leading when it comes to quantum computer manufacturing, the parallel industries, the misuse of what is being discovered, the potential of technology espionage puts a bigger risk on what might come and when it might come as well. What we call cryptography-relevant quantum computing, or quantum computer, CRQC, will render today's cryptography obsolete. And this is what I want to focus on in the next 10 to 15 minutes, and more or less what we can do about it. All modern PKI infrastructure or modern PKI encryption will be impacted, whether it's data at transition or data at rest, for a simple reason. The way encryption and the way security has been developed historically depended on the fact that we're putting mathematically very complex algorithm, very complex formulas that computers and the capable processors of today will take a long time to solve. Any of the encryption mechanisms would take hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, maybe 1 million a year to fix with the computing power that we have today. And when a company tells you, I've configured or I've came up with a processor that's 100 times faster, what could be taking 10 million years to decrypt will take 100,000 years. Still doesn't pose any threat. The other thing that we need to look at is the long-term implication on all the encrypted data that we have. If we think about states, if we think about files that are under secrecy laws that get released after 25 years, and this is common law in many countries, what we also understand that there are certain files, certain information that cannot be released. And typically, almost all this information is now digitized. Whatever is encrypted today on a hard disk in a vault will be vulnerable to post-quantum cryptography if we don't step up and upgrade the security systems that we have. The other important thing we need to look at is not only if we know what we can or what we want to do, is how long it takes. I've been working with customers in the region and all over the world for 20 years now. The time it takes companies, the time it takes governments to act and to deploy what they think is needed varies between, I would say, 6 to 24 months. Quantum computing will not give us that time. The security that will be threatened by the computing power that we see means you have to start preparing today for what's coming in 5 or 10 or even 15 years. And I'll explain a little bit in details. Most of the algorithms that are being modeled to decrypt traffic or to decrypt data that we have today is built around the assumption of, is built around 2 algorithms. These algorithms that were developed 20 or 30 years ago assume something around 4,100 logical bits to be able to decrypt some of the most complex algorithms that we have today. However, if you look at the graph in front of you, almost the predictions that we've seen from quantum chip manufacturers has always been on spot. And you see that with the white dots on the line below. The blue line above shows you how much we are able to make the qubits less and less noisy. And at some point, these 2 lines merge, and we expect that there will be technologies not widely available, but potentially with some of the state actors to decrypt the most difficult, the most complex algorithms that we have today, somewhere between 2028 to 2032. That is, if we don't see new algorithms being developed beyond the Shor algorithm. And I would be personally surprised if post-quantum cryptography would depend on an algorithm that was developed in 1994. And to give you an insight, there are some Chinese researchers that claim that they can, with 372 qubits and using some of their algorithms, to decrypt what we have today as an encrypted data. So no one knows how quickly we will get into a situation where the existing computing power, the less noisy the bits we see, and the algorithms that are being researched will be able to decrypt the data that we have. NIST, which is the National Institute for Standards and Technology in the US, has been, since 2016, looking at what they can do to standardize PQC, post-quantum cryptography. And in August 2024, the first set of standards has been released, and late in October, there were about 15 other standards that are being looked at. So the motion, the progress is there to look at what we can do as we hit the milestone of having quantum computing available and ready. As you've seen on a comment on a previous slide, IBM think, or at least thought, that they can get there by 2033. And I think now the date is a little bit earlier. What we can do today to prevent tomorrow's attacks? I think the industry is struggling to deal with today's attacks by itself. So what we can do to prepare ourselves for tomorrow's attacks? There are 2 main things that we need to look at. And I'll start with the one on the right. Assuming it's very hard to decrypt VPN traffic, government confidential traffic, between 2 embassies across the globe, I don't have the computing power to decrypt them today. I don't have the computing power to understand what's being shared. But what I can do, I can try to keep copies of this data for 10, 15, 20 years until I have the computing power to decrypt the data and look at it. This is scary. Everything that you communicate today, every confidential data that's being transmitted, if someone can take a copy of it and keep it at rest somewhere, when quantum computing is ready, we can decrypt the data. The other blind spot that we have is that there are, at the moment, a lot of technologies available that are quantum resistant. So you could have in your network a bad employee or a foreign agent that can infiltrate your network and install a malware which is quantum computing QC resistant, and you will never be able to decrypt and understand what's going there. So these are some of the most time-pressuring threats that we see. Now, the good thing is, from a standards perspective and from a technology perspective, we have the right means to deal with it. I won't take you into a lot of technical details, but what you can get with today's solution with Palo Alto is the ability to scan the traffic in your network and see if there's any post-quantum cryptography running in your network. And you can trace where it's coming from. And although you cannot decrypt it, but at least you can stop it. The other thing that we're doing, we are developing, or we are having the technology on our devices at this point in time to run what we call hybrid key mechanisms that allows your systems to deal with the encryption that's happening today, but also be resistant to quantum computing, as much as we think it's possible. We have technologies around quantum random number generators. We have technologies around key exchange mechanisms that make even quantum computers not able, as much as we know today, to decrypt the traffic that you have. These technologies are not only developed by Palo Alto, but these, as a proprietary technology, but these are based on standards that we've worked on with NIST and are at an RFC level. So this is the good news that we can deal, or that we can look at today. This is what we can prepare for. We have the technology to make not all our data, but a good portion of the data that we have quantum ready and post-quantum cryptography resistant. What I want to take you over in the next few minutes is what, apart from some comments that I will cover, what's the main path, what's the journey that you should consider in the next, starting today and in the next 5 years maybe, to be ready for a post-quantum world. What can you do, in your premises, in your networks, in your infrastructure, to prepare as much as you can for a post-quantum world? The good thing is, the matter is pressuring some of the most powerful states and governments in the world. The US with NIST is driving this. The Biden administration released last May a memorandum on what the US agencies, the US governments need to do to be ready for a post-quantum world. They originally put the date of 2035. I think this is very ambitious. They'll have to pull it forward much more. But what's most important to understand is that the governments are already on the move to prepare for that. And I've listed on the right some very interesting white papers that you can look at and that you can read to understand what's happening globally. But it's not only the US. It's all the governments across the world. Some are at a better advanced stage. Some are more collaborating. If you look at the US and some of the states in Western Europe, Australia, they are collaborating to try and create a common standard. But the hope is that this effort expands to include all the governments in the world, because we need a standard to prevent security gaps and to make sure that data in a post-quantum world is as safe as we need it to be. And again, you can see in front of you, whether it's the NATO, the World Economic Forum, or the European Commission, they're all looking at what PQC mean, what post-quantum cryptography requirements there are, and what they need to do to be prepared. This is the steps that we recommend anyone who is responsible for any kind of a digital information in any kind of an enterprise to look at. Number one, you need to assign resources and build awareness. Everyone in your company, especially the C-suite, especially the people responsible for finances, need to understand the impact of not being prepared, and need to understand the impact of not starting to get prepared now, because time is not to our advantage. You need to assign resources, you need to assign responsibilities, and you need to understand as well as a second step that this is something that is critical. Defining the strategy starts with defining responsibilities. You need to understand and you need to know who is responsible for every task that you need to assign. Who's responsible for sourcing vendors? Who's responsible for understanding the inventory? Who's responsible for undertaking the strategy? Everything that you need to look at and develop for a post-quantum strategy needs to be looked at and defined from a strategy today, not by people, but by function. The next thing that you need to understand is what inventory that you have. And this is even important at an individual level. You need to go and ask yourself, where do I keep my digital assets? Do I have a hard disk in my safe? Do I use Apple that stores on iCloud? Do I have data on my phone? Wherever the data is, the data needs to be secured. So if you run a company, you need to understand what equipment you have, what vendors you need to deal with, and where is your data at rest stored. The next thing is that you need to evaluate solution, test and test again, and understand what's the best solution that works for you. And the key thing, as I will mention in my closing slide, is to stick with vendors that are standards-based. The scene will be full with startups. You will get a lot of companies that claim a breakthrough in one or two areas of PQC, but the most important thing to look at is to work in a standard-based, with a standard-based vendors, because in the future, interoperability will be key to the ability of securing your enterprise or your data end-to-end. And the last thing is to continue and monitoring the progress. What you know today about qubits, what you know today about algorithms, what you know today about vendors that are available in the market will change in the next month or in the next week. It's a very fast-moving scene. So what do you need to upgrade? Everything. And these are technologies off the shelf. I didn't mention here the customized technologies or customized application. Everything that you need to deal with should be upgraded to be ready for a post-quantum world. This is what we're doing. It's very important to understand that we are in the phase of developing standards. The company that will, in my view, dominate a post-quantum world is the company that's very early starting to engage with governments, with industry bodies to develop the standards. One of the most important, we're part of many forums, but specifically what we're most important, what we're most proud of is that we co-chair with the White House a panel of 36 vendors that's looking at how to be prepared for a post-quantum world. And we are the only peer security vendor on that list. So we're we are as close as possible to the decision makers, and we're as close as possible to the ability of influencing a standard-based approach for a post-quantum security world. These are some of the things that we're looking at. Post-quantum VPNs, we are ready. We can give you the ability to encrypt your data in a fashion that will be resistant to quantum computers. This is available today. We can give you PQC visibility and policy control of your network today. The rest of the areas are things we are looking at and we're researching, but on quantum in depth specifically, one of the key areas that mathematically make encryption possible is random numbers, is the ability to generate random numbers. The existing algorithms of today are pseudo-based. It's very easy with quantum computing to predict the next random number that a current algorithm will generate. However, in a post-quantum world, generating quantum random numbers will be essential for maintaining the integrity and generating very powerful keys. And last month, on the 22nd of January, we announced an open API for quantum number random generators so that the industry comes together and develops a standard-based approach. So these are the areas where Palo Alto is defining, I would say, the industry and help influencing in a standard-based approach. And this is what I was saying. End-to-end interoperability, like today's technology, if you put a security device in your network that doesn't talk with other devices, it's useless. A standard-based approach will be key to making sure that whatever you invest in your network will get you the right return on investment and that you wouldn't have to change it in 3 or 5 years from today. Thank you very much. Chris, thanks for the opportunity today, and I hope everyone enjoys lunch. Thank you.